Here for the Daily, and we're going to talk about the Old Trafford and perhaps the end of Old Trafford with Wayne. How are you, sir?
Yes, I'm all right. I'm glad to be revisiting this topic.
Yeah, we've been here before, haven't we?
Yeah. Do you know what though? I do feel like I feel like it's a fluid thing, right? And I think that feelings change the more information that we get. So I don't think it's a case of like you said something once, and because you say something slightly different in 2 months' time, it's not necessarily hypocritical because you get more information and things change.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Well, look, we've got the committee, the task force, of which Gary Neville is a member, and Sebastian Coe and a few others from around Manchester Council and other stakeholders. Are kind of supposed to provide a report by December, something like that, but information is sort of leaking out. And in the meantime, it sounds like behind the scenes, the club or Ratcliffe is thinking about what are the best options. And, macro picture, we're still in a position where Ratcliffe owns 28.7% of the club, not the whole club. And we've got that kind of in the background. And it's kind of ridiculous to think that he would spend £2 billion of his own money without owning the club. So they're all going hand in hand, I think. And then the other two things we'll talk about today are the fan consultation that the club's launched today, with an email out to fans with a survey. It takes 15, 20 minutes, something like that to complete. I haven't done it yet, but I shall today. And that's going to end. That consultation period is going to end on October the 6th. It sounds like they're taking this seriously. Must put out an announcement basically saying the same. I think there's a sense there is engagement with the club. And then Gary Neville gave an interview to The Athletic, and we can talk a little bit about that. Really? So the news, Daily Mail said that alongside the preference for a new stadium, that they've looked at the potential to sort of downsize Old Trafford. There was a talk, I think last time we talked, actually, there was talk about downsizing it to a sort of 30,000 capacity stadium for the academy teams and the women's side and so on the same sort of campus, alongside a major regeneration of the kind of Trafford Wharf area. And that potentially looks more complicated than we first thought. Actually, downsizing Old Trafford, obviously, I think I'm right in saying that when West Ham downsized the Olympic Stadium, or in fact, when the Olympic Development Company downsized the Olympic Stadium, it cost over £100 million to do. And so obviously it'd be quite a lot cheaper just to build a new mini stadium. So thoughts on that to start with?
Yeah, it's a tough one because the economics of downsizing Old Trafford and using it for the purpose of, the women's team and the youth and reserve team, it doesn't suggest that with all the will in the world, we might project that there's going to be a lot of growth in the women's game, but over the next generation, realistically, I don't think you'll see crowds week in, week out that would fill an Old Trafford as it is. However, the cost that is necessary to downgrade it, it's a complicated thing because obviously you've got the running costs of it, right? And then the operational costs of whatever they're losing on that match day revenue, but they're not really. I don't profess to know. You might have the figures there, but I don't know what they are losing on like let's say that they keep the capacity as it is, but they run it and then fill it every week, which they would do. Not fill it every week, but have crowds in there every week for games. How much are they likely to lose? I mean, it's not out of the realms of possibility that the women's game will take off.
Right, just keeping Old Trafford as it is. Yeah. I mean, I guess then you'd have two large stadiums to maintain. And as we've seen, like the amount of money that's been spent on Old Trafford is not insignificant over the last 20 years, but it's not enough to keep it up to par. So I think that's the question, isn't it? And then the second question is, what's fit for purpose? I mean, I think everyone agrees that Lee Sports Village isn't fit for purpose. Not from a playing point of view, because it's about the right size for the crowds that United Women get. Unfortunately, they're still not as large as, say, Arsenal, Chelsea, or at least Arsenal, when they play at the Emirates, they fill it. But Lee is miles away and not easy to get to.
Yeah.
And so generally not considered fit for purpose for that. So a purpose-built stadium for the women and for the academy sides seems appropriate. It's the kind of thing. I think this kind of dream comes from the La Masia, Barcelona, in view of Camp Nou, and whatever the stadium they call. Is it called Joy or New or something? Some name they gave it on the Etihad campus. That's where this idea sort of comes from, that you have a stadium inside the main stadium as a dream. I'm not sure too many City kids are looking at the Etihad, the empty had, or the atmosphereless had, as Peter Schmeichel pointed out, and going, "Oh, that's my dream."
No, you're right, but
yeah. So that's where the concept comes from, at least.
Yeah, but then it's a difficult one because Old Trafford, the original Old Trafford, would be the one with the prestige and the heritage. So you wouldn't play there aspiring to play somewhere else. I'm just thinking, like the practicality of having a 75,000 and a 100,000 seat stadium versus having a 40,000 downgraded and a 100,000 stadium. The comparison is negligible, really, in terms of maintenance. I'm just thinking that £100 million figure that you mentioned, and how much of that can be absorbed in that operational difference. Like, is it worth spending 100 million, or if you're going to spend that anyway, earmark it for the maintenance and things like that, or the operational. Like with the idea that, hopefully a women's stadium would exceed 40,000 at some point. So you wouldn't want to be leaving yourself in a position where you've got to either upgrade again or have them move into the men's stadium, which I'm not against. I'm just saying
for big games, yeah, sure, why not? Barcelona do it. Not every game for their women, but obviously Camp Nou's under renovation at the moment, but they had done it. I mean, sometimes they played at the smaller stadium and sometimes they played at the big one and they got big crowds. So I think the Amex at Brighton cost well less than 100 million. And so, if you were going to build, I think the financing of it means it's probably logistically and cheaper just to knock Old Trafford down after the new stadium is built. So there's no case of United having to play away from their own stadium at all, as say Tottenham did for a while. And then just build a new one on a regenerated campus. I mean, this is a very, very long-term project, but I think I suspect that's the kind of vision that Sir Jim has. And my only worry with, I think that's probably the best option for the club, right? Like, definitely the new stadium just makes more financial sense. I mean, I think you could argue a refit is like, you can argue it from an emotional point of view. You could probably make an argument that a Real Madrid or Barcelona style refit with new facilities would make financial sense. I'm not sure. It's really only about 50% of the cost of a brand new stadium, something like that. And not necessarily 50% uplift in potential revenue generating. So I tend to lean to the idea that a new stadium is probably the best idea for the club, even if that is difficult. And then on the downgrading Old Trafford, I suspect that just knocking it down as part of regeneration, building a smaller stadium on the same footprint or around about the same footprint is probably going to be the decision. Yeah. But everyone will have a chance to have their view. And it does seem like the club is taking this seriously.
Yeah.
So if you check your inboxes, there'll be a fan survey there. I'm sure it'll go up on manunited.com at some point. They said they're expecting about 500,000 responses. It's quite a lot. So that would be a very good canvas of general opinion about United. So and that many responses will of course be people who go regularly to Old Trafford and people all around the world. And a different relationship with Old Trafford, I suspect, but a relationship.
Yeah, so. It's difficult because you don't want to discount those opinions of people who maybe have been once or twice, or maybe have never been, and they're attached to the romance and the history and the tradition of the club, because you don't discount that because everyone's got their relationship with the club.
Yeah.
I will say that from a practical point of view, someone who goes every other week, and someone who, I've studied the history enough to know that there's, people will know that I'm attached to the history and the romance of the club. So I am attached to Old Trafford, but anyone who's listened to this podcast will know that I have put forward the theory, at least, that it makes logical sense to build a new stadium. I can't see, as time moves on and the more that we learn about all the plans and how good the plans are, and as we accept, all right, probably a stadium move is for the better, it's difficult to see how the original stadium is kept justified. I mean, I offered an argument there, but that's if they want to keep something. Therefore, but I would feel like you preserve some things of it, but they're inevitably going to get moved. You can keep the statues in the same place, probably. You could probably even keep. Well, if you're going to knock down the Stretford end, you could still keep the Jimmy Murphy statue there. If you're going to knock down Fergie's stand, you're going to still have Fergie's statue there in the same place. So that doesn't necessarily need to change. Even the Munich tunnel can be preserved, really, even though it's a relatively new addition. So the sentiment attached to that isn't. 90s, I mean, even the Munich tribute itself has been moved around
a few
as well.
times.
So, I mean, those kind of things, they can be kept in different places. So the more I think about it, and I'm not advocating for this, I'm just thinking I can't see another logical solution. And I think that actually the way that United are going around it, considering it's a highly emotive issue, to give everyone a chance to vent themselves, to give it enough time that people can actually look at the options and say, this is the only practical way forward. They'll understand. I would understand. There's no other way forward than the one that they'll eventually choose. And they've got all the right people behind it who can make those decisions. So, and like I've said before, the club have moved. It's part of the club's identity and heritage to move. As difficult as it is to palate, it's there. Yeah. It's in the club's tradition, and it doesn't mean that what the last 115 years hasn't happened. It's just something else to celebrate and commemorate.
It's just part of the history of United move. Look. I think there are good ways to do it and bad ways to do it, and there are good new stadiums and there are bad new stadiums. I don't think anyone at Ajax or Bayern Munich are complaining about the quality of their new stadiums. They're both fantastic. And I think there are some, especially if you look to America, really fantastic facilities that produce bad atmospheres, right? Yeah. Stuff that it's all spaced out. There are big sofas, whatever, nice facilities that make money, but not very fan-centric, I think. And so I hope as part of this process, we don't end up with some awful soulless bowl. I don't want Wembley of the North. Jim says it as a concept, but the actual stadium's horrible. I mean, every time I've been there, there's quite a few, I'm like, I hate this place. Yeah. And so something that's very fan-centric, has a nice big Stretford end, and is generated towards building an atmosphere, has the right kind of roof, so the acoustics work, which they don't at Old Trafford really right now. Like it's very separate stands, isn't it? And those are the things that matter, and those are the things that will come out in the fan survey, I hope. Yeah. And they've got football people on the task force as well. Fan groups like Must are involved, and it feels like everyone's going to get an opinion here, and hopefully they make the right kind of decisions on financing, because it's not really been discussed. And this will be, I suspect, a little bit controversial or trigger United fans, because it will almost certainly not come from Jim dipping into his own personal pockets and pulling out £2 billion in order to spend on a new stadium. And that's probably the starting point of the costs, right? So it will get financed. Real Madrid and Barcelona both did this by taking out a new mortgage, effectively. So it's kind of separate from the club as a piece of finance. It's not on the club's books and P&L, but they do pay towards it. And it's 1 billion euros. Barcelona, it's a lot.
Yeah.
So United likely will be paying for the stadium for the next 50 years or so. And it'll be a significant cost. And it'll be up to Sir Jim when he gets full ownership to decide exactly how that's financed.
Yeah.
So
I worry about things like that because he's making a decision that he's not going to be accountable for in his lifetime. And
yeah,
all right, maybe he can underwrite it. He can offset some of that against, say, the guarantee with Ineos or whatever like that. But I feel uncomfortable in the same way that we did with the Glazers, because United before 2005 were self-sufficient and they were as powerful as Real Madrid in terms of they could flex the muscles. They were the most powerful financial club in the world, and they're not that. They're not that now. They could
not
be
nearly.
Yeah, they could be, but with decisions like this, you get long-term benefit, sure, but I feel like the pressing concern is the debt and the team on the pitch. I know some people will say the pressing concern is the facilities as well. I don't see it like that. I've talked about this before. It's sort of fine if they see it differently. Who am I to complain about that? But it's not there in my list of concerns. And I think I worry that you're putting the cart before the horse. There's other things, if we can't deal with the debt that we've got and we can't become competitive in a short period of time, the demise of the club or the stagnation of the club will mean that it's more difficult to fill. I mean, right now, I mean, this is me speaking with complete transparency about what I experienced at Old Trafford. So there's a seat next to me that
where's your seat?
South stand. I was one of the ones that we were one of the ones that we weren't moved. In the recent move, we were one block away from the seats that were moved. The seats that were moved were supposed to be moved for people were told they'd be moved for families and youth team players and things like that. It's not the case. They'd be moved for hospitality. And people are charging. I mean, I understand why they're doing it, because people are paying through the nose for these tickets. So our season ticket is, let's say, £1,000, give or take. And the people who sit in that seat, so someone who sat there for Liverpool paid around £650 for that hospitality. So that seat's going to pay for itself as far as the club are concerned within two games.
Yeah.
And that's happened. That's far from the only example. That's the one that's near us. So there'll be plenty more in that same area, because that's the area that's been changed. And that demand's there at the moment because they have been oversubscribed. I mean, for once, it's not been there are ways around it, but for once, that talk about the season ticket list being difficult to join is true. There've been ways around it where people getting the cup season ticket and they've managed to leapfrog into the system, but nonetheless, it's difficult. It's very difficult. It's almost impossible to arrange things like we've tried to arrange to get that seat next to us, and we can't. No even response to emails, because they know that they can sell that on for more than 15 times the value of it. And those things.
Yeah. I mean, I think this has been concern all season, or for a few seasons now. Sorry, that the creeping sort of hospitalification, making the word up there, of seats, of normal seats, is happening, and the club have denied it, and fans are saying, no, actually, I've seen this happen. And alongside that is the spectre of dynamic pricing, which is just very, very common here in the States. Every sporting and music and entertainment event is priced like that, and just not been that common in the UK. Obviously, what happened with Oasis tickets, City fans discussing, wouldn't listen to them if I was dead. But that has obviously brought this to the front of mind. I think it's a separate issue from the new stadium, but if a new stadium is financed, and likely it will be, then how that is paid for and how United make more revenue than the costs is going to be really important. And we look at Tottenham, they're making bundles more revenue than the costs, right? It's been a great decision for the club, right? And whether they spend it right or got the right coach or anything is completely separate. But that has been a very good decision for the club. And I don't think fans who were at the Tottenham Stadium for the North London derby at the weekend were complaining that the pitch wasn't the same one that Glenn Hoddle scored on, right? They've got a great new stadium. It's very fan-centric. Everyone thinks it's a brilliant stadium and it's good for the club. So that's all we need to focus on if that's happening. Alongside that, if there are 100,000 seats and 10 or 15,000 of them hospitality paying £600 a game and everyone else has got a reasonable price, I'd accept that. So,
yeah, but I don't want to discount. I'm just conscious of the way that you said that, and I know you were tongue in cheek with the Glenn Hoddle thing. It's a very different thing. Glenn Hoddle, great player though he was, to the sort of like the memories that people have at Old Trafford, the things that they witnessed there. Like, I feel like there's the emotional thing. I wasn't there. Neither. Surprisingly, viewers, Ed nor I are not old enough to have been around when the Munich disaster happened, so we weren't there at Old Trafford in February 1958. So plenty of people were. They're still around to tell that story, and I think the attachment there, I can understand it, so I don't dismiss that. I just think I agree. Everything that you're saying there, I just wouldn't dismiss.
Yeah, no, I don't dismiss it at all. I know I'm putting my logical hat on. When I first started going to Old Trafford, I'd rip a ticket out of the book. You got 4 or 5 a season or whatever to bring a friend along. I'd go with a friend. It was less than £2 to get in. I'd go and stand on the Stretford end.
Yeah.
Or sometimes I'd go sit at the back. And weird bit on the Stretford end when you had this box of wooden seats. So that's early 90s, late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah.
And I started going on my own. And so, everyone's got memories. But I suspect that what's going to happen next is that we make the best decision for the club, which is probably a big new stadium that will last another 100 years. And that's Sir Jim's legacy, sorting out the club's finances. I mean, he's got very big pockets, by the way, just to end on the money. I know we're worried about that, but depending on what he wants to do with his billions, he paid himself a £500 million dividend last year.
Yeah.
Right. So
I didn't
either.
No.
I didn't get a £500 million dividend. Maybe Goldbridge did. Probably did, looking at his finances. But I'm kidding. Anyway, okay, we'll leave it there. Go fill out the fan survey. Have your, you don't come back in a few weeks' time going, oh, well, they did this thing, I don't like it. It's your chance to have your say now, albeit one of thousands, but the community voice will speak.
Yeah, the most important vote this year, so get to it.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you, everyone. Bye now.